these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, everybody. Special episode today. It's a legislative update episode. It's May 15th, Friday, and we are voting on some really ridiculous things in Congress. I'm in my office right now in between votes. So we're voting on two major things today that I have to tell you about, and I'm going to go into a lot of detail and later, but I'll give you the overview first. So the first thing is proxy remote voting. Democrats really want us to do, well, proxy remote voting. Why? Because they're scared to come into Congress and actually work. I think this is ridiculous. There's a lot of constitutional arguments for why this is ridiculous. I'm not going to go into any of those. They're relevant, but here's the most relevant point of this. It shows lack of leadership that you're too scared to come into work. If you want to telework, well, we should help them find a different job where they can telework. I fundamentally believe that. This isn't about, well, hey, it's 2020 and we can, do Zoom meetings and committees. Hey, it's 2020, why can't we, download an app and vote? Yeah, I understand that technology exists. I understand we're living in the new age, but I also think that shows fear and lack of leadership. So that's what Democrats want to do. They want to show you, they want to demonstrate to you that they're scared and that you should be scared too. Either that or they're legitimately scared. Maybe it's a mixture of both. Either way, it's not based in reality. It's not based in science. We're in Congress today. We can socially distance as we walk there and we vote. You walk in, you don't have to get really near anybody. You put your card in and you vote. And more importantly, we get up here and we work and we debate the ideas that we need to debate. Now, this gets to the second thing that we're voting on today, this $3 trillion plus package drafted in secret by Nancy Pelosi and Democrats. And I think released Tuesday, 1,800 pages worth, mostly progressive wish lists of items that they'll claim it was what is desperately needed to help and show compassion for the American people. That's what they'll say. In reality, it's a far different story, and we'll get into detail on what's in that bill and our problems with it soon. Not the least of which is the fact that we simply don't have that money. But there's a procedural problem here too. There's a process problem. The fact that the Democrats want you to believe something that isn't true. They want you to believe that we can only come into Congress and vote once every 3 weeks on a multi-trillion-dollar bill. And then they make a bunch of theatrics every time that happens. It's totally unnecessary. Now, I understand that that's generally how politics has happened for years and years and years. We all know it. We all watch it on the news. That doesn't matter. It should not be happening that way when there's an actual crisis. It should not be happening that way when we have, 35 million jobs lost. This is ridiculous partisan opportunism politics. This is purely what they're engaged in. They never had any sense that this would actually pass. I mean, how could it? You don't draft it at all with the other side. You don't even bother. You know full well that the Senate's controlled by Republicans. The president is a Republican, and this isn't going to pass. So what? You wasted 3 weeks doing just I guess virtue signaling to their base. That's the only explanation here. There's nothing else is going to happen with this bill. We could have worked on it together. Really, what we should be doing is one day at a time. You come up here and you think about each problem that the country is facing, and there's plenty. Let me give you an example. Okay. So one of the problems with the last bill, well-intentioned bill, where we wanted to give additional benefits for unemployment insurance or unemployment benefits. And the way we did that is adding $600 a week extra to the current unemployment benefits. Now, that differs state by state because different states have different formulas. So that also means that different states, at least some states, ended up in a situation where the unemployed were being paid more to remain unemployed as opposed to going back to work. Okay, so there was a disincentive to go back to work. And we're hearing this across the country, actually, from businesses, especially small businesses, but all size businesses as well, that they can't rehire workers. Okay, they want to get their business back up and running as we move towards a reopening, and they can't get their workers back because their workers are making a purely logical financial decision to stay at home. They get those extra benefits through July 31st. So how do you fix that? Well, I have an idea and I have a bill that would actually fix that. And there's really no reason the Democrats should be opposed to this. Of course, they want to extend those same generous benefits to the end of the year, which would really crush our workforce. But they shouldn't be against this idea either. And my idea would be this. We allow that $600 a week to be maintained, remove the rest of the benefits, but allow that $600 to be maintained if they go back to work. So now you definitely have a financial incentive to go back to work, and you're not going to be financially penalized for it. And you allow that through July 31st. And you get 6 weeks of it. And so that's just an example. I just bring that up because that's what we should be debating every day. Every day for the last 3 weeks, we could have brought up problems like that and found solutions like that, and then voted on distinct problems and distinct solutions. I think that's what the American people would expect us to be doing. What they wouldn't expect us to be doing is to be acting scared, like we can't come into work, trying to pass legislation to telework, to televote. Right, because I mean, you know, our ancestors are just rolling over in their graves. The Rangers who were storming the beaches of Normandy, or U.S. soldiers storming the beaches of Normandy. I mean, you can just imagine. Wait a second, Congress is afraid to vote. They're afraid to walk in to vote. You all have health care. You can get tested if you want to. This isn't hard. We've already implemented plenty of safety measures, and yet again, today they are making the argument that we should do proxy voting. It's cowardice to such an extraordinary degree. It's hard to fathom. It really is. Let's talk about the debt, because before we even get to the details of what's in this bill, we have to back up a second and think about what kind of money we actually have. We don't have it. We're printing this or borrowing it from our kids. So it's not even our kids anymore. It's my generation. It's the millennial generation, Gen Z. Hey, it's Gen X at this point. All right, that's the reality. Let's give you some numbers real quick. So this year, it looks like we will have almost $4 trillion of deficits. So that's adding to the $23 trillion in debt that we already had. So that's going to end up being $27 trillion in debt. That's going to put us around 100% of GDP in 2020. And it was originally going to be 79% of GDP last year. Now it's going to be 100%. And it's money we just don't have. You have to keep something else in mind, too, about how this could affect interest rates. There's this sort of idea out there that, hey, interest rates are so low that we can continue borrowing forever. That is not an assumption that we should put a lot of faith in, especially when, given that the entire global economy is going to be hungry for more financing and borrowing, it is highly likely that interest rates begin to rise eventually, and that we are not in this perpetual state of low interest rates. And so there's a real question that in the modern era, whether an inflow of foreign capital is going to be available, and therefore whether or not the government can borrow up to 18% of GDP at the same time the private sector is also trying to expand investment to reopen the economy. There's a real question whether that's going to put an upward pressure on interest rates. And the argument that the level of debt is no longer relevant because interest rates are so low, it really starts falling apart as interest rates starts to rise. And, to understand this, if government borrowing costs simply rose to the historical average from the end of World War II through the end of the millennium, the public debt of 100% of GDP in 2020 would require interest payments of over $1 trillion annually. And that would eat up 28% of all federal revenues. That's a pretty big deal. If you're my age, if you're a millennial, you really have to be concerned with this. I urge all my fellow millennials to ask your local officials and governors why they're keeping you at home still. Why is that? What is the data to support this? We know a lot more about this disease at this point. The only way to actually get the economy going, it's not a $3 trillion stimulus. We've already spent trillions of dollars in an attempt to save the economy. It can only do so much. The only way to actually save an economy is to allow the economy to function. We've purposefully stopped the economy from functioning, and I see no reason to continue doing that. I don't think there's an argument anymore, period. We told everybody we were going to do this to flatten the curve and to save our healthcare system. Those missions have long been accomplished. there is no longer an argument. Okay, there's this moving of goalposts where we're now telling people that basically the new idea is that there's no more disease, that there's no more virus. Yeah, this virus that doesn't have a vaccine, all of a sudden there's not going to be any more of it. Just stay locked away forever. That was never part of the plan. That was never possible. And yet that's what's being told to people, and it's being used as an excuse to keep the economy locked down. And so what you're seeing is this $3 trillion bill that is designed to keep you scared, to keep you locked at home, and to spend all your taxpayer dollars that we really don't have. That's basically what's going on. So what's in it? So even if we had all this money, then we have to ascertain whether it would even be helpful to the economy. And that's a totally different question. So let's actually look what's in it real quick. For one thing, almost $1 trillion of this bill is for bailing out poorly run states. And yes, you would guess it, they're generally blue states. If you're a representative, if you're a member representing a red state like Texas and you're voting for this, you are voting for Texan federal taxpayer dollars to bail out poorly run states. And you need to answer your constituents for that. Yeah, you know who I'm talking to. There's a lot of you out there. There's no justification. There really isn't. And let's look at what's actually happening here. According to the OMB, total state and local spending in 2019 was $2.4 trillion, of which $600 billion, or about 25% of all state spending, was actually paid for directly by the federal government. And of that amount, about 67% was in the form of Medicaid grants to the state. This is important to note because that is much of the cost of the coronavirus pandemic. It's already being borne by Medicaid. The federal government's already paying 62% of those costs. Okay, this doesn't even account for all of the money we've already spent in the past CARES Act to help states with costs related to the pandemic. There's this weird notion out there that all money from the federal government is basically free, and money spent at the state level, that actually hurts people because, they have to balance their budgets. Now, it's true, they do have to balance their budgets. And it's true, you do have to find a way to pay for that. But there's no reason to think that we don't have to find a way to pay for that at the federal level too. Those are still your tax dollars. And the American public, and this is on all of us, we have to accept this fact eventually. And we have to stop this false belief that it's free money and that there's just an endless amount of money that can be spent. Okay, so out of this $3 trillion bill, almost $1 trillion of it is for bailing out state governments, bad pension programs, things like that. And so aside from bailing out states that didn't manage their finances well, there's a lot of just really partisan objectives here. Another part of the bill is meddling with the census to drive partisan objectives. So it actually prevents higher education institutions from providing citizenship or immigration status data and prevents federal agencies from providing citizenship data to the Census Bureau to count the number of citizens. I mean, this goes back to this old age debate that conservatives seem to think that we should actually know whether you're a citizen or not when we're counting you in the census. That seems obvious to most of us. Democrats don't want that. And it also mandates that temporary census enumerators receive enhanced paid sick leave and family leave, despite the fact that they only work a maximum of 12 weeks every 10 years. This one's interesting too. Gives salary increases and benefits to the already stable federal workforce. So federal workforce gets a salary increase and an increase in benefits. Mind you, the federal workforce has not been harmed by this virus. They have to stay at home more. They're teleworking mostly, but they haven't lost their jobs. They work for the federal government. And I don't know if that strikes you as fair, then, I guess we disagree. But establishes a premium pandemic pay wage for federal employees. And it mandates all federal agencies to require their employees to telework through the end of 2020, despite the fact that the current administration policies have already given agencies that flexibility. It also presumes that any federal employee who contracts COVID-19 has contracted it on the job and is therefore entitled to tax dollar compensation benefits. Again, maybe you think that's fair. Keep in mind, federal employees, me being one of them, all have access to health care. Do you think that this segment of America should get additional benefits? There's also a lot of Green New Deal. Of course, there's a lot of Green New Deal priorities in this bill. You had to be, right. Just mandates mostly on federal buildings, making them greener, making them all the things that they love. On the tax side, there's going to be a repeal of the SALT deduction cap. So if you guys remember what that is, it's state and local tax. And in the tax bill a few years ago, and we basically got rid of that deduction, which was harmful to high income earners in states like New Jersey, New York, and California. And so the Democrats have long wanted to repeal that provision because, well, those are their donors, okay, in New York and California. And, we all know that. And so they want to get rid of that. So this bill would be a huge windfall to higher earners in blue states. Another thing in this bill, a bailout for union pensions. But, of course, that has nothing to do with everybody else's lost retirement. Union pensions have long been in trouble. Pensions everywhere have. They've been poorly managed. And of course, again, these big boss unions are big supporters of our Democrat colleagues. And there's some other provisions in here that just really make it harder for America to get back on track. Again, even if we had all this money to spend and we just wanted to give it away, are you giving it away in a way that actually grows the economy? And the reality is a lot of this stuff just hurts American businesses way more. So here's one. Forces every employer, no matter what, to provide paid leave for another full year and leave some employers with an unfunded mandate. So remember, we did something similar to this early on during the pandemic, this sort of mandated paid leave. And there was a balance there. It wasn't perfect, but it applied to employers with fewer than 500 employees, okay, because we assume that larger employers already have paid leave arrangements with employees. The mandate was coupled with relief to offset costs, so a tax credit of 100% of wages paid, and employers with fewer than 50 employees could receive an exemption for undue hardship. So it didn't apply to the really small businesses. In this new bill, Democrats are trying to kill that balance, and it just hurts businesses, makes it harder to hire, makes it more likely that businesses will face even more hardship. And here's what they do. The bill expands the mandate to all employers. Okay, so now nobody's exempt at all. No relief, only provides tax credit reimbursements for employers with less than 500 employees and removes the small business exemption entirely. I mean, you try running a small business like this. And Democrats don't care about that. They love to say how they're in favor of small businesses, and yet it seems like every single thing they ever do almost specifically hurts small businesses. More regulations hurt small businesses. Minimum wage of $15 hurts small businesses the most. Small businesses don't have teams of lawyers and regulatory experts to figure out all the red tape. They need freedom. That's what a small business wants. They need some entrepreneurship and some freedom, and America will thrive. This isn't rocket science, people. The economy isn't rocket science. Give it the freedom to thrive, add some ground rules that are clear and concise and predictable, and the economy will thrive because America is awesome. Okay, next, here's another one. Forgives $10,000 of federal and private student loan debt for every borrower. Okay, I mean, this is just a long-time Democrat priority, and I get it. If you're a student and you're listening, like, well, that would be nice, right? But is it good for the country? Is it the right thing to do? We really have to ask those questions. Who's paying for that? That's your investment. It's your investment for your education. And if you're concerned about equity, by the way, this overwhelmingly benefits the wealthy. These are just the facts. I've done previous podcasts on this where we really break down the numbers. Overwhelmingly benefits the wealthy if you're going to do student debt relief, and overwhelmingly aids white households over minority ones. So I don't know what that does to progressive brains when those contradictions occur, but I assume it's not good. More things that hurt the economy. This bill imposes a one-size-fits-all more OSHA regulations on all employers, which would be duplicative and counterproductive in addressing all of the changes that we're trying to make under COVID-19. I mean, again, if you're trying to get the American economy to recover, you have to give businesses some freedom. Democrats' instinct is to always regulate more and make businesses susceptible to more lawsuits. They believe there's a sense of justice there. It's a real belief they have. That belief is aided, by the way, from the fact that trial lawyers tend to donate very, very heavily to Democrat campaigns. That's overwhelmingly the truth. This one is just strange. It actually encourages the release of violent criminals to states, basically providing money to bribe states to release violent criminals into our neighborhoods. I'm not even sure what their reasoning is there. Again, you've seen it across the country. There's been this push from the left to depopulate our prisons and to use this as a sort of use this entire crisis as sort of their own really strange version of criminal justice reform, where they want to arrest you for not wearing a mask or playing catch with your kid or giving takeout out from your restaurant or surfing by yourself. But by the way, these are all real examples. I've cited them before. They want to arrest you for that or fine you for that, but they want to release criminals. I don't know what's going on in their heads. It's laughable, but it's not, because it's really not funny what's happening across the country. This is the bill actually rewards and promotes the employment of illegal immigrants also in this bill. Under the guise that it's helping businesses hire workers. Of course, we have 35 million people unemployed. This isn't the time to be attracting foreign workers into the workforce unless absolutely necessary, and that certainly isn't the case here. I think this is common sense. And of course, I mentioned this before a little bit when I talked about the unemployment insurance, and I told you my solution for that problem, which again, you would think that would just be a logical bipartisan solution. But in this bill, they do the exact opposite. They actually extend the $600 a week federal pandemic unemployment compensation through January 31st, 2021. I mean, this guarantees that workers won't come back to work. You're putting workers in a situation where they get less money if they go back to work. Now, you would hope they still go back to work, because they should do that calculation in their head and say, well, my job might not be waiting for me if I don't take it back right now. But again, my bill doesn't make them have that hard choice. This does. And it makes sure that our economy never grows again. So we're spending more money. We're not even collecting tax revenue because workers are staying at home. And we're reducing our growth. We're reducing our economic capacity. This is beyond foolish policy. Forget the partisan politics. This is not good policy. And if you remove the red and blue jerseys from this, anybody who's thinking can see that incentives matter in an economy and structure matters. And this is really poorly implemented policy. It's hard to imagine why they do this. Again, because most of the left's policies stem from this sort of, hyper focus on compassion. There's nothing else. They don't see anything else. And if giving you more money feels more compassionate, well, then they assume that's the right policy. Of course it's not. I always put it this way. I wonder what would happen. Wouldn't it be better if we treated the American people the way we treat our kids? Because we treat our kids like we love them. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative. You love your kids. You have a certain set of guidelines and ways of parenting. You teach them that their actions matter. You teach them that there's consequences to their actions. You tell them that they work hard, they do well. You provide incentives. You provide punishments. You give rewards for chores. You don't give equal rewards for unequal work. You do all of these things as a parent because you want to prepare them for the real world, and you want to provide that structure. So why on earth would we treat the American people so differently than we treat the kids that we love? I don't get it. And it's a really good thing to ask Democrats when you're trying to understand the psychology behind some of these crazy policies. All right, I'm gonna end this discussion with one of the most egregious parts of this bill. It just has nothing to do with coronavirus at all. So this has to do with elections. And before I even start this conversation, let's just all put our common sense thinking hats real quick and wonder aloud why we even need a change to our elections. Last time I checked, everywhere across America, we are standing in line at grocery stores. We touch things. We put them on that little conveyor belt. Somebody else touches those things. They scan them. Somebody else touches those things, puts them in a bag, and then you take that bag home and you eat the stuff. Okay, that's what you're doing. We're all doing it. And by the way, like this activity that we're all engaging in as we stand in line and touch all the things and then take them home and eat them, That's not what's causing a lot of the spread of the outbreak. You look at numbers from New York City, by the way, the vast majority of new cases are still from home. Okay, so most likely people interacting with one another, without the watchful eye of Bill de Blasio, I guess. It's overwhelmingly what's happening. And so you got to wonder, if you can do that activity with a lot of human interaction at the grocery store, why can't you vote? Because you actually don't need that much human interaction to vote. They might hand you a piece of paper. Again, depends on your state, of course. You might hand them an ID. At least that's what you do in Texas. Thank goodness for Texas. Because I don't know why you would go vote without an ID. You would think that in something as important in voting, that you would want to know that it's the person who is casting the vote, and it's actually that person. I don't know. I guess that's a strange discussion for some people to have. But very limited human interaction. Very easy to keep it safe. Okay, you can keep people 6 feet away from each other. You can spread out the voting machines. Guys, common sense. We know this is easy. And the argument that it isn't is totally disingenuous. So the argument that you even need to change elections drastically is on its face an absurd one. Okay, but this is what they want to do. This is what in this bill. There's 5 major things here. One is ballot harvesting. They're actually nationalizing ballot harvesting, a process where a paid political operative may come to a voter's home, collect their absentee ballot, and deliver it to a polling station. This process was misused in the last election in North Carolina by Republicans. Okay, again, this isn't partisan. It's just bad. It's a bad practice. Okay, it just is, and it's obvious why, because there's a break in custody of the ballot. That's a bad thing when you actually care about the sanctity of your elections. It just doesn't work. Okay, in California, this is how Republicans got beat. So this is Democrats now using it. Again, I'm not even sure they're doing anything illegal. We can't know. It's too hard to know. That's kind of the problem. It's really hard to know if there's fraud taking place because there's basically no rules. And you saw Republicans win elections in California and then lose 3 weeks later because these ballots just keep coming in. They keep getting harvested. And you're like, where are these things coming from? And as soon as they reach the threshold and beat the Republican, all of a sudden they stop coming in. I thought that was very strange. But those are the rules, which are very, very loose. I find it odd that this is like the one thing. Voting is the one thing that Democrats don't want any regulation on. You gotta find that a little suspicious. All right, number 2, same-day registration across the nation. It forces states to allow individuals to register to vote on Election Day. And this creates a huge administrative hurdle for election officials, and it often results in longer lines at the polls. Listen, registration should matter. Voting matters. It's not easy to do on the same day. Okay, and you have all year to register, guys. Let's be real. Number 3, polling locations. It prescribes really unrealistic uniform polling location requirements on states. It mandates that states must place polling locations in areas within walking distance of public transportation. How are you going to do that in rural areas? Again, and why? What is this all? What does this have to do with coronavirus? Actually, shouldn't we encourage people not to take public transportation during coronavirus? I don't know. And it implies all these strange things. The implication is that current polling locations are discriminatory, and when is this? It's never been proven true. Remember, I got asked by Bill Maher why Texas didn't want people to vote because he saw long lines in Harris County, and I had to remind him that, well, in Harris County, our elections are run by Democrats. And so you can blame Republicans all you want, but Democrats run that place. Also, Democrats screwed it up. There's no conspiracy here. And the county clerk admitted to screwing it up. Machines went down. They didn't really know what they were doing. She's a new county clerk. That's what happened. There isn't, this notion that there's some kind of discrimination is just not based in evidence. Number 4, all mail elections from unmaintained voter rolls. And that's a key point, that voting rolls across the country are not maintained well. It's been well documented that there's millions of more people on the rolls than there are people eligible to vote. That's a problem. It's a problem, and there was a great op-ed written that I had referenced actually in that Bill Maher interview, where it was a Texas representative was going door to door and using registered voter data and, coming up on empty lots, PO boxes, non-citizens. So these people, if you just took your current registration rolls and mailed out ballots, all of these places would be getting ballots, and anybody could fill them in and mail them right back in. You have to see a problem with that. Again, it doesn't have to be massive, structured, conspiratorial fraud. It can just be mistakes, and every time there's a mistake, your vote doesn't count. Listen, our elections they should be strongly regulated, and we should know as Americans that when we go in to vote, that our vote actually counts, and that it's not going to be canceled out by either a mistake or a purposeful fraudulent activity. And I just want to add this one thing, because obviously some people will say, oh, well, some states do all mail election. Well, fine, but it takes a long time to get up to that and to do it right. And it's not clear that they do it right, by the way. Again, for the reasons I just stated, you can't just mail out those ballots. Okay, problems are going to occur. You need to give states a lot of time. And also, it's up to the states. It's not up to the federal government if they want to go into an all-mail kind of system. Okay, last thing, number 5, provisional ballots. Any provisional ballot must be counted no matter where cast within the state. I mean, again, this is just, it creates chaos for local election officials to trying to maintain and manage local elections. So, and this, this, based on your own experience, I bet. Different municipalities, they have differing ballots. There's local elections going on. It's like the people who wrote this bill it's like they've never voted before. And they just have no idea how voting works. You can't do some of this stuff. And honestly, what is the point of it? So, I mean, that's an overview of this 1,800-page document that I got to remind everybody, written in secret, had no chance of passing, and was released Tuesday so that we could vote on it today, Friday. Pure virtue signaling, $3 trillion of virtue signaling, trying to convince you that they care the most, that they're the most compassionate because they're willing to spend the most of your money. Listen, I've talked about this as a common theme in Democrat Republican politics for a long time. There's a theme on the left, and it's they attach the size of their heart, the size of their morality to dollar signs. And they want you to believe this crazy notion that there's all these benefits and services and money just hidden here, and if politicians were only kind enough and compassionate enough, they would just give it to you. Of course, that's not true. And again, that's not what you teach your kids, is it? The Republican Party does stand for what is sustainable and for what is real. The reality we actually have to live in. We're actually honest with you about what we're spending and when it's too much and what we can do and can't do. It is not responsible for us to simply tell the American people that we can just spend endless amounts of your taxpayer dollars and we'll put the burden on your kids. That's not realistic.